Thank you, Jonathan. Welcome again to the webinar. Today's content is Parents as Team Members, How to Communicate Effectively with Early Childhood Professionals. In this webinar, you're going to learn the importance of your role in working with the early childhood professionals and some skills to help you communicate more effectively with those professionals. Learning to communicate effectively with the professionals will help to ensure that you are an active participant in the decision-making process regarding your services for your child and your family, rather than just a passive receiver of that information. I think one of the things that we can all recognize as parents is that when we learn that our child has a medical diagnosis, a disability, or developmental delay, we're all of a sudden forced to interact with systems that we would never have been in voluntarily. Learning how to communicate with professionals like the early intervention service providers, early childhood special ed school staff, therapists, both private and through the schools, and even doctors, is essential to your child's success. And so that's why we're wanting to talk about these skills today. Parents, your role is important. You are the experts on your child, just as the early childhood professionals are the experts on the methods and the programs. Good communication with the professionals in your child's life is a key to successful outcomes. It's important to remember that you are the expert on how your child's disability is impacting his or her life and their participation in daily activities. Some of the roles that you may experience, or that we talk about, team roles. Parents, your role is to help the team understand your child. As I said earlier, you know your child best, and you know how that disability is impacting your child. You also have the right and the role as a parent to agree or disagree with the services that your child might be receiving. And then it's the professional's job to listen to your concerns and develop goals. As a parent, you are the most important person in your child's life. You know your child better than anyone else, and you are the one person who is there with your child 24/7 for as long as your child chooses to live in your home. It's important that you recognize the importance of your role, and this might help you to reduce some of the feelings of fear or nervousness that we all experience, especially when we're meeting with a large group of professionals. It's also important for you to remember that you and your family members are really your child's main source of learning and growing. Parents are really a child's first teachers. The role then of early intervention services is to help you to become more confident and competent in your role of helping your child to develop. The role of the professionals is to really help you to see that what you are already doing is wonderful, and many of you as parents already are doing lots of things on a daily basis to help your child grow and learn. Sometimes the professional's job is to just maybe help you tweak those things a little bit to enhance your child's development. You also have the right to ask for and receive explanations from those professionals about your child and a proposed educational program for them.
Judy,
Yeah.
we have some questions already that I'm going to convey to you. One person wrote in and said, I don't think that the team understands my child's disability. What can I say? And actually there's kind of a related question. The team seems to be resistant to information I'm trying to share about my child. What can I do?
Going back to the first question, I think if it feels like the team maybe is not interested or is not listening to what you have to say, one of the first questions I might ask the team, or whoever it is, the members of that team, how much experience they have working with a child with your particular child's disability, asking them where they've gotten their information. If they seem to be resistant to getting that information, I think what I would do is ask for their ideas first. See, okay, if you're not, if you're not willing to hear what I have to say, then I'll listen to what you have to say. But then, as a parent, you have the right to disagree with something that they're, maybe proposing a particular methodology that you're not sure is going to really work for your child. But as a parent, you really do always have the right to question or to disagree with a proposal. And then in some ways the best way to do that in my mind is to listen first and see what they have to say, weigh that against what the research that you've done or what you already know, and then go forth from there with what you seem would be best for your child. Does that make sense, Carolyn?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Let's see. In kind of what we were just talking about, being able to share what you know, it's important to communicate your child's strengths and needs. In fact, there is actually an outcome of early intervention services, a family outcome that the family has been able to learn and understand how to communicate those strengths and needs. And by doing that, you can really help to plan for the most appropriate services for your child. Some of the things that you might also want to talk about with a professional, because you as a parent are really also in a learning mode here, especially in early intervention. It's not just the child who is learning some new skills, but also as parents, we're maybe learning some new strategies or some new ideas and taking in lots of information from those professionals. So it might also be helpful for you to share with those professionals, how do you like to get information? If you're a parent who's a real visual learner, and so it's helpful for you to get written information. If you have a parent who is real technology savvy or experienced and would like to be given resources on the internet because you want to look up those resources yourself, or you're listening to podcasts or that kind of thing, let the staff know that. And what helps you to learn a new skill? Again, are you somebody who just wants to read about it? Or are you a parent who would rather have a professional demonstrate that new skill to you, allowing you maybe to practice it and then maybe coaching you about tweaking what it is that you did a little bit? What's your learning style? Being able to convey that kind of information to the professionals really will allow you to take in information, which then will in turn help you to really work with your child in a more efficient, practical manner. As you're observing your child and trying to determine some of your child's both strengths and weaknesses, here's some things that you may want to ask yourself. A number of questions. What kinds of activities or interests does your child enjoy? You might include information on their favorite toys, their favorite games. If they have a pet, what do they like to do with you? What do they like to do with siblings? Kind of what are the favorite things, what are the things that you like about your child? For many of us, we would say our child is happy, or they're smiley, or they're very determined. They interact, whatever it is. You can just talk about some of those things. I think really important is, what are your hopes and dreams for your child? Where do you see your child in 5 years or in 10 years? And I know sometimes as parents of very young children, we're having enough trouble just getting through the day-to-day. So when someone says, oh, you have to have long-term goals, it might feel overwhelming to us. But all the research really shows that it's the things that we do when our children are very young, and how we introduce them to our community and to children, typically developing children, and sort of push for those kinds of services that really do have a long-term effect. We also talk about having high expectations early on for children really does lead to better outcomes for them as they get older. How does your child respond in certain situations? Is your child fearful? Is it hard for your child to separate from you? Are they bothered by loud noises, certain foods, certain styles of clothing? Some of that information, in addition to giving people information about your child and maybe avoiding some things with your child, also may help the team think about maybe some evaluations or assessments that might be helpful to get at the source of some of those things that might be bothering your child. Sharing some information about what things that you have tried that have worked, things that you have tried that have not worked. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel when it comes to interventions. And so if you've already got some information about things that you've tried and just didn't work for you, didn't work for your child, sharing that information with the staff will be real important. And then finally, what are some of the things that I'm most concerned about? Am I worried about the fact that my child is not eating? From a nutritional standpoint, or our family meal times so disjointed because of your child's eating issues? Is your child not sleeping? Sleep patterns are real important. A child needs a certain amount of sleep, as do parents. And so if either one of you is having disrupted sleep, might be important for the staff to know about that and being able to think about some things that you could do to help that. For some parents of toddlers, biting might be an issue. or aggressive behavior, hitting, temper tantrums, things like that. So being able to think about all of those things ahead of time before you meet with those staff, and jotting a lot of those questions and answers down will help you to be prepared for that first meeting. When it comes to identifying those strengths and needs, it's important that we look at all areas of development. I think sometimes as parents, we may have an overwhelming concern. Perhaps our child is not walking, or maybe we're concerned because our child is 2 and not talking. But you don't want to segment out your child, so you want to look at all areas of development. So these areas might include cognitive, that's what the school staff is going to talk about, which really has to do with your child's thinking, their ability to play, children who understand even that game of peekaboo. A child being able to play that game says something about the child's cognitive skills. Their physical development, and that would include gross motor, their walking ability, fine motor, what they're able to do with their hands and fingers, their vision, their hearing. The other area is communication. When we talk about communication, it's not only being able to talk, but it's also are they understanding what they're hearing. Being able to talk is called expressive communication. Being able to understand is receptive communication. Is their language intelligible? Can you understand what they're saying to you? The use of language, are they able to get their needs met? How do they interact with other children? Another area would be their social emotional development, how they respond to caregivers, their self-regulation. That's the ability, that's where sleeping comes into play, their ability to calm themselves when they're upset. Engagement means how do they interact with you as a caregiver and other caregivers? Are they interacting with siblings or other children who come to play? And then finally, their adaptive skills, how age appropriate, how are they able to feed themselves, dressing, toileting, sleeping, things like that. You also want to look at all areas, not just how your child is with you alone, but how does your child act at home? How do they act in a child care setting? Or if they're older, how might they be in a preschool setting? How do they interact with other children? You may want to get information from other family members. Sometimes as parents, because we're with our kids all the time, we may not be as tuned in to some concerns as other folks who maybe just see them once in a while. Sometimes if we're first-time parents, we also may not really know what are all the stages of development and what should my child be doing at a particular age. And so getting info from other family members can be particularly helpful in that area. It's important to know that while all children develop at their own rate, there are general guidelines out there for child development. And then as you consider your child's strengths and needs, and if you look at the areas of development, you want to look for a consistent pattern. So in other words, it's not just 1 or 2 times that your child did or wasn't able to do something, but more looking at a pattern that this is an everyday occurrence or it's happening several times a day, because the occasional occurrences may not be something to worry about, but it's that consistent pattern that is going to give us something to be concerned about. So now we've got some questions. We've talked about some questions, some areas that you may want to look at, some ideas about looking at strengths and needs. Now is when we sort of think about getting ready for a meeting. Once most of you may already have been involved in making that first phone call, asking for help from early intervention or from early childhood special education. Someone has contacted you and told you that they're going to be coming to your home to have a meeting with you to talk about services or to talk about that evaluation that might happen. You want to be prepared for that meeting, and so it's important that you plan ahead. Because if your child does qualify for services, you and that team of professionals will be meeting to create your child's individual family service plan, that's the IFSP, or an individualized education program, or the IEP. So you want to think about some specific questions that you might have for the staff, in addition to some of those notes that you've already made regarding your concerns about your child's development, the strengths and needs that you've identified in your child. These are some other questions that you may want to think about. What types of services might be available for you and your family? how often you might be able to get those services, where would they be delivered, and who would be providing them. Again, keep in mind that as you're preparing for this meeting, your role is really going to be to help the team understand your child and sort of see your child through your eyes and how you see them on a daily basis. Because keep in mind, again, that team is only going to be with you and your child maybe for an hour or 2 hours during that evaluation process, and they may not see the whole child that you see, or see your child in different activities or through different parts of the day. So it's going to be your role to really give them a picture and paint a complete picture of your child. Then their role as a professional is to listen to your concerns and then help to develop some goals based on your child's strengths and needs, but also your family's concerns and priorities if you're in the early intervention system. Keep in mind that those early childhood professionals are really there to help you do what you're already doing very well. As I said before, parents, you as parents are your child's first teachers, and there are many things that you're already doing to help your child grow and learn. But what they may be able to do is offer some suggestions to you to help you tweak those things that you're already doing that might enhance your child's development based on your child's developmental delays or disabilities. So write down some information that you think is most important to share. For families who are receiving early intervention services, part of that whole process, evaluation process, is going to be something called a family interview. Some teams might call it a family routines-based interview. What they're really doing, and what this is an opportunity for you to do, is talk about your child's disability and how that disability or developmental delay is impacting daily life for your child and your family. I think some places or some forms will refer to this as a family assessment, and I think families sometimes get real nervous about that word. And it's not that they're assessing your family, they're not assessing your ability to parent or your home or anything like that. It really is supposed to be an interview with you as a parent, talking about what your concerns and priorities are for your child's development. Once you've shared your concerns with the team, you'll be given an opportunity to prioritize those concerns. So for some parents, they may have a list of 15 or 20 different things that they're worried about or concerned about, and it might be unmanageable to have 15 or 20 goals on a child's plan. But being able to prioritize some of those things and figure out what are the things that you want to work on right now will allow you and the team to really create those goals and outcomes for the IFSP or the IEP. It's also important for you to remember that on an IFSP there can be goals for your child and for you as a parent. Maybe there's some information that you would like to learn about your child's disability, or something that you'd like to learn about helping your child grow and develop. It's very appropriate to have that as an outcome on the IFSP. Of course, for a child over the age of 3 where they're writing an IEP, those goals are going to be largely focused on the child. It's also important that you gather other information that you might wish to share with the staff, like if you've had private medical assessments done, private evaluation done. Being able to give the staff a whole picture of your child by sharing that medical information for them will be important.
Judy, we have another question here quickly on the medical point.
Okay.
What parent asks, what if I don't feel comfortable sharing some medical information?
Again, the information that you share with the team is going to be voluntary. The one thing that I would say about that is though the team, again, as I said earlier, the team is really only seeing a small snapshot of your child. They're also not medical professionals. So if you've had a medical diagnosis or other testing done, by sharing that with the team, you're giving them a clearer picture of who your child is. The other thing that may be important down the line is by knowing who those medical people are that are involved in your child's life, if you feel comfortable at some point in time signing release of information, those being able to partner between the school staff and the medical staff may avoid some conflict. It also may avoid the medical staff telling you to work on one goal or one outcome or doing it a particular way, and the school staff having other ideas. If they can collaborate together and be working on a more focused way, it may avoid some confusion for you as a family. Again, it's going to be your comfort level, and I can understand you sitting around meeting with a group of strangers for the first time, and your comfort level, you may not have complete trust in those people yet. But as you become more comfortable with them, think about the information that you might want to share maybe a month or 2 or 3 months down the line, as it will help, I think, to provide better services for you and for your child and your family. Once you've prepared all that information, you've gotten ready for a meeting, and this is not something that obviously you're going to be doing in the middle of a busy day caring for your child. And I think many of us as parents of young children with disabilities know that sometimes our quiet time is late into the evening. But I would really encourage you to find that time, even if it means maybe having a friend come over and watch your children for a while, or counting on a relative or something like that, to give you the time to prepare ahead of time for that meeting, so that when you walk into that meeting, you really have that sense of confidence that you've got some information written down that will make it easier for you to share with the team. So once you've identified some strengths, the strengths and needs of your child and your family, share them with the team. Give some specific examples to illustrate. For instance, if you're concerned that your child doesn't really know how to play with other children, again, the strength would be that your child does enjoy playing games, but your concern is you have maybe a 3-and-a-half-year-old who really has not learned how to engage with other children. That will give the team some ideas of some things to work on as far as goals on the IEP. If your child's strength is that they do focus on you and there is some kind of communication going back and forth, but you can't understand what it is your child is trying to say to you. You can't meet your child's needs because you don't understand what it is your child wants. That will give them a clearer picture of what your child's needs actually is. Again, as you've worked with your child, especially if your parents have a child who's a little bit older, if you found some strategies that have been successful, make sure that you've shared those strategies with the professionals as well, so that they can actually build on those things that are working well, rather than, again, as I said before, recreating the wheel. So now that we've talked about some of the needs that families have, and really the responsibility of you as parents to be doing some of that homework and to be identifying some of those strengths and needs, preparing for a meeting, getting ready, it's now important to sort of talk about what are some of the skills that might be needed as we're trying to communicate with this whole new group of people that we've not interacted with before. So we're going to talk a little bit about communication. I looked up the definition of communication in the dictionary. Some ideas that they had, the imparting or interchange of thoughts, opinions, or information in a variety of formats, a document or a message. But I think, simply put, communication is the sharing of information and ideas. It's the sharing of information from you as a parent, what you know about your child, what you are concerned about with your child, and sharing that information with the professionals who are going to be working with your child and your family. When we talk about communication, there's really 3 styles of communication. The first style we're going to talk about is being assertive. And sometimes I think people, especially Minnesota Nice, we get a little nervous about using that word assertive. That's somehow going to turn people off, or we're going to be rude. But really, being assertive simply says clearly stating your point of view and then taking into account what others have to say. Standing up for your personal rights and expressing thoughts in direct, honest, and appropriate ways. Other people generally respect an assertive person. This might be an idea of being assertive in an IFSP meeting. We both know different and important things about my child. Let's work together to develop an appropriate IFSP or an IEP. Another type of communication is passive, discounting your own needs and always deferring to the other person. People learn quickly that they can take advantage of a passive person. You might say to yourself, well, you know, the professionals really know best. I'm just going to go ahead and sign that IFSP or that IEP and just trust that they've done whatever they said they're going to do. I think as advocates that we've learned that, yes, there should be a certain trust level there between the family and the professionals, but families really have a responsibility to make sure that if you're creating an IFSP or an IEP, that when you get that proposed document back home, that you really take the time to carefully read through and make sure that the things that you talked about at that meeting, the concerns that you voiced, are clearly documented there before you sign that IFSP. And then the third form is that aggressive style, discounting others and insisting on what you want, sticking up for your rights and beliefs in a manner that really violates the feelings of other people. People often feel forced to do what an aggressive person wants, but they might feel angry about doing it and will only do as much as they have to do. The aggressive person teaches others to fear them and to avoid them. So if you think about how we're talking about working as a team, probably an aggressive approach is not really going to foster that spirit of teamwork and being able to work together and trust each other. An example of that, those professionals know nothing about my child. I'm just going to write the goals for the IFSP or the IEP myself and insist that they use them. That's probably not going to result in a ongoing partnership with the schools or other professionals in your child's life that's going to serve you really well. I think at this point, the other point that I want to make too is that for many of us, our children who are entering early intervention or early childhood special education are just beginning a long association with our school districts. For some children who have a developmental delay, the goal of early intervention obviously is really to help them catch up, and many children do exit the program at age 3 or possibly at age 5. But for a lot of us, we're beginning a long-term association, and so sort of setting the tone of that association early on, I think, is going to serve us in a better way. So when we talk about some communication skills that might be important in a meeting, it's always important to listen carefully. Try to understand the other's point of view, even if you do not agree. I know sometimes I find myself in a meeting that I'm so focused on something that I want to remember that I say that I may not be listening real clearly to the other person. That's why I find it helpful if I'm going into a meeting and I have some things that I want to make sure that I talk about, that I jot those things down ahead of time, then I can go into that meeting, know that I've got my notes and I've got my concerns written down, and it allows me to be more actively listening to what the other person has to say. And sometimes I have to bite my tongue as somebody's presenting some suggestions to me, and I'm sort of ready to disagree, but I find if I really listen to everything that they're trying to say, by the time they get finished with what they're trying to say, I've heard it in a different way, and maybe my disagreement has changed, or maybe I'm able to then say, well, I hear your side, but here's some things that I might want to have you consider. Always feel free to ask clarifying questions. If you're not sure what they've said to you, you need to hear it in a different way, don't be afraid to ask for clarification. The other thing that I think the tool that helps is to restate what you think you heard. Okay, I think I'm hearing you say that you're going to come to my house once a week and provide this service. Is that true? And then maybe they're going to clarify that, no, actually it's going to be something else. And then, as I said earlier, if you are a parent who needs time to reflect on what you've heard, let the team know that. Don't feel pressured into making a decision until you've had the time to reflect on it. For many families, that means going back and talking to other family members. Maybe it's calling up PACER Advocate and saying, here's what they're saying. Does that sound reasonable to you? For families, this is where it's their first time being involved with the system. They really may not know what to expect, and so you have the right to say, I'm not sure this is what I'm really, what I'm really in for. Does this make sense? So always have take the time to reflect on what you've heard and to ask questions, and if you need time before you get back to them, don't hesitate to tell them that you need that time.
Judy, we've got another question here regarding to these meetings. A parent writes, I feel that I'm all alone at these big meetings. How can I gain some self-esteem so I can use some of these skills and not feel so overwhelmed?
I totally hear what you're saying, and I think one of the things that's nice about early intervention is that mandatory team membership is a little bit smaller than when you get to writing an IEP where there have to be more people there. And I think one thing that I found helpful when I have to go to a meeting like that is, I said earlier, really taking the time to prepare ahead of time so I don't feel disorganized and my thoughts aren't all jumbled when I walk into that meeting. The other thing that I found helpful is maybe to ask a friend, a family member, someone else that you know has a child like your child who could attend that meeting with you. It doesn't always have to be a professional advocate, because sometimes all you're wanting is just one other person there, another set of ears, so that if your mind gets gets wound up in dealing about one issue, you've got another set of ears there to be hearing what's being said, or even somebody who can take notes for you. And I guess if that's really not possible and you're one of those parents who really feels they need some time to think and reflect and you don't want to be taking notes at that meeting, another strategy that I've seen parents use is to ask if it's okay with the other team members if you bring a tape recorder, and being able to tape what you're hearing and then go back and play that with somebody else, sort of replay the meeting in your mind, allows you to maybe give you a sense of confidence walking into that meeting. Did you say you had another question, Carolyn?
Oh. Nope, that's the only one right now. Thanks.
Okay, I think we covered that one. Let's see. At a meeting, keep an open mind. Be willing to consider something new. I think oftentimes as parents, maybe we've talked to other people, or we've read something in a book, or we've gone online and seen some things, and so we might be coming in with one idea that we're pretty certain is the only route to go. And sometimes we just maybe need to be willing to consider something new. Not that you totally disregard what you had thought or throw it out, but be willing to hear something new and then kind of, weigh the pros and cons of both. Learn about the choices that might be available to you. Take notes. Again, this is one of those places where if you have the ability and really the luxury of bringing somebody else with you to help take notes, I think it's helpful. The other thing that we may not often think about is our facial expressions, or what's known as nonverbal communication. We might think we're being very agreeable and we're not saying anything and we're not disagreeing with the team, but oftentimes our faces say something different. And so being aware that that might be out there, and if you're sitting at a meeting with a big frown on your face or a look of consternation, the team may not know what's going on in your mind. And so being, again, free to ask those questions. And if you're sitting, at a table with your arms crossed, and people might view that as being unapproachable, whereas how you even sit at a table can make a difference. So just be aware of those things. Not that you walk in being real nervous about how you look, but just something to be aware of as you're going into a meeting. Then at the end of the meeting, kind of checking, again, going back, what have you heard, what has been suggested, some things that you want to make sure of. Do you know the services your child will receive? Now, if this is your first meeting, or maybe it's the meeting to discuss the evaluation, you're not going to leave that meeting knowing what the services are, but you should be able to leave that meeting with kind of a good sense of what evaluations are going to be done, who may be part of doing those evaluations, because you've talked about those things, and then that you'll follow up with an evaluation plan. If it's a meeting to talk after the evaluation's been done, and maybe they've gone over the evaluation results with you, you may or not even at that point in time leave the meeting knowing what the services will be. But you should have a pretty good idea, number one, of whether or not your child did or did not qualify. And then you may even have a sense of some goals that you've talked about. So there may be other questions, but these are some things to think about. Do you know the services your child will receive? Do you know who will provide those services? Is it going to be an early childhood special ed teacher? Is it going to be an occupational therapist or a physical therapist or a speech therapist? Do you know how, obviously, hopefully you'll know how often those services are going to be provided, who's going to be providing them. The other important thing that you might want to talk about is, okay, maybe there's one person coming out to your home, but who else are they talking about, I think, or talking with? I think this particularly gets important when you have a child with a particular disability where there may be some expertise involved, perhaps a child with autism, a child who is blind or visually impaired, a child who's deaf or hard of hearing. You want to make sure that the folks coming out to your home are partnering with the specialist, the teacher of the blind and visually impaired, the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, an autism specialist, who will help the team to understand how those, particularly those disabilities, really impact your child's ability to learn and develop, and you want to make sure that they're working in partnership with those people. As you're leaving that meeting, do you know what you can do to help your child? And this is something I would say once your child begins receiving services, at those weekly visits, when the person's coming in the door, they should be asking you about how things are going. Maybe you talked about something the week before that you were going to try out with your child and your family. Some of the questions that should be asked, did that work? And as parents, we also need to be able to be honest and say, well, you know, I was really busy, or this came up or that came up, and I didn't get to it, or, you know, I tried, but it didn't seem to go as smoothly as I hoped it would be. Could we try it again today and talk about some ways to maybe tweak it or to add something in? And then another question, do you know when you will meet again? If this is an evaluation meeting, you want to know when is the evaluation going to be done, when are the meetings going to be scheduled, who's going to be coming out. If this was the meeting to review the results of the evaluation report and you're going to meet again to actually write the IEP, you want to make sure that you know when that meeting's going to be. If this is the meeting where you've sort of plan for the IFSP and you think you know everything's going to be okay, how soon is somebody going to be coming out to your house? When can you expect them so you can get it on your calendar? All important things to make sure that you know before you leave that meeting. And I guess the final thing I would say is before you leave that meeting, making sure that you know who is the main person that you can contact, their name and their phone number, if you're a person who likes to email, their email address, so that you know if any questions come up before that next meeting, that you know who you can contact to get those questions answered.
Judy, we have another question here, kind of in regards to these services. Parent says, I'd like more frequent communication about my child's progress. What can I do to obtain that more frequent communication?
I think depending upon the age of your child, if you are receiving IFSP services, you as a parent are seeing that provider on a weekly basis. And part of that weekly visit should be talking about whether your child is or isn't making progress, if what you're doing is working. Once your child turns 3 and they're on an IEP, I think that's one of the biggest concerns that we hear from families is, especially depending upon who's doing the drop-off and pick-up and things like that, families are all of a sudden feeling isolated from those service providers and not having that communication. There are many school districts that will say to you, well, we'll give you progress reports 3 times a year. Well, for a lot of families, especially for children who are not communicating or where progress is slow, getting those 3 times a year or twice a year progress reports are not going to be enough for you. So I would really encourage you to talk with your IEP team to see about the possibility of having possibly a weekly communication log that goes back and forth. Quite frankly, for some kids, you may need a daily communication log. Now that daily or that weekly communication log may not have lots of information about progress because kids may not be making progress that frequently, but maybe you want monthly progress reports or quarterly, if that would serve your purpose. But that's the kind of thing that you want to address with your IEP team and actually get that kind of communication written into your child's IEP. The other thing that I think sometimes parents don't think about when their children are enrolled in inclusive preschool programs, there is a preschool teacher or a learning readiness teacher or a Head Start teacher, whoever, who's also involved with your child in addition to the early childhood special education staff. And the parents of those typical kids that are enrolled in those programs get parent-teacher conferences. And a child on an IEP who is enrolled in those programs also has a right to sit down with those regular preschool education teachers or Head Start teachers and get the same kind of information at conferences that other parents do. So it's important that you're availing, and ask if someone doesn't tell you about those conferences, make sure that you're talking with the staff so that you know when, and usually they're November and then maybe January or spring or something like that. So make sure that you're availing yourself of those opportunities to meet with both the regular education staff in addition to the special education staff that are working with your child. When we talk about teaming, again, just a reminder, parents are the experts on your child. The early childhood professionals are the experts on methods and programs, and it's that partnership working together with the parents and the professionals that's really going to be the key to successful outcomes for your child's life, and then especially for parents who are involved in the early intervention system, the closer that you as parents and the professionals can work together, even achieving the family outcomes will be important to support your child's. That would be the end of our presentation. Again, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, it's important to us that you complete the online evaluation that will be coming to you via email. It's a SurveyMonkey evaluation, so real easy to fill out. We want to give you one last opportunity to ask any questions that you might have based on our presentation today. If you think about questions afterward, I am the Early Childhood Coordinator here at Pacer Center. I'd be glad to answer any questions via email, or you can contact me by phone here at Pacer and just answer any questions that you might have. And I don't see any questions coming in, so I think we're going to end today's presentation. Thank you for participating.